Welcome back to another episode of TableSetters covering all things Major League Baseball. As always, I'm Steve, joined with my tag team partner, Devin. What's going on, man?
What's going on, Steve? It's a snowy day here in New York. We got some playoff football games going on, but the baseball talk is hot as ever. I just said to you off air, I've been on Twitter way too much today with lots of news and people commenting and disagreements. So, yeah, man, baseball's on fire still.
Yeah, and as we continue to discuss, the football season's coming to an end. Of course, we're recording during divisional weekend for time and space for you guys to reference that. And I know you are someone that's been talking about it. We are in the same fantasy football league, so we have the chat going together. You've been a huge critic of the play that we've seen all year. It's been sloppy. Do you feel like the NFL has kind of come into its own with the best teams playing? Or do you still feel like the product is a little bit lacking?
No, I think the playoffs have been pretty good. Today has been very, very, very entertaining. The snow kind of helped with that a little bit in the first game for sure. Everyone loves a snow game. But when you get down to this, everyone's been playing for a while now, so you're in a groove. It's the best of the best. It's a little bit of a war of attrition, and there's no dogging it out there. Everyone is giving their 110%. So yeah, the product is what it should be right now. But yeah, I'll stick to my guns and say the first half of the season or so was a little bit of a rough watch, and I think there'd be a lot of people that agree with me there. But I'm enjoying what I'm seeing now.
And there's a good conversation to be had. I know that in April, we look at some players that get up to slow starts, some teams get up to slow starts notoriously, but there is a comparison to be made. Some of these teams that play in the Northeast that are cold, we always talk about this, and to look at teams that are a little bit, I guess, worse off in April and then they're better off in July. We had that whole conversation with the Rangers, like, wait till it gets warm in Arlington. They're going to kick off and they're going to be really hot. That ball's going to be traveling out of there. So there's something to be said about getting used to the season, but the NFL, the shortening of training camp, that is a huge piece to why the game has been lacking for weeks 1 through, let's just say, five, 6, 7, 8. And I think you can make the comparison to baseball. I mean, it's loose, but I think quality of play, spring training usually has the players ready to go. And by the time we hit April, mid-April, I think all the teams are pretty much firing on all cylinders, weather permitting, obviously.
Yeah, I will say I feel like every year you get excited for opening day and the first week of the season and baseball on always. And there's always a time in those first couple weeks where you're like, this has been a little bit ugly. Sometimes the pitchers are a little bit ahead of the hitters, maybe vice versa at times. And it's cold weather. Guys don't like playing in the cold, especially in the Northeast or in a place like Colorado or Minnesota. But you're right. I think at least you have that spring training, which gives you plenty of opportunity to get yourself set and ready to go.
We're about a month out from spring training taking hold,
Ooh.
and we're looking forward to that as well. And if you guys want to continue to support the show and follow us, what we're doing, follow us at TableSetters Pod on IG and also on the X Machine. We're more active on Twitter for conversations, but we'll continue to post all the updates, our show, future guests, where you can find our episodes on Instagram. We originally weren't on TikTok. We're still not on TikTok, but we were without TikTok for all of 3 hours, and it
Oh,
seems like it's
man.
brought back to life. And we're not at TableSetters Pod over there, but maybe one day since it's now legal again in the US.
Yeah, I've never been on TikTok. I have a few friends that send stuff on there, and then I can't even see it because I'm not a member of TikTok. But I was always under the impression, maybe because of its origins, that if you're on TikTok, it has to be all these like arm dance videos, like something like that. So I don't know. I guess we could do baseball videos. Do we have to dance while we put like a baseball clip up?
From what I understand, how it goes for how you're, I guess, exposed to memes, they originally get posted to TikTok, then they go to Instagram Reels, then they go to Twitter, and then by the last people seeing them, they're on Facebook. So if you're ever seeing something new on Facebook, it means that people have seen it 4 months ago. So if you're ever sharing something on Facebook, just understand probably people that are 10 years younger than you saw it like a long time ago. That's how the progress goes of when memes are exposed. But the origin of a lot of these memes, similar to how Vine used to be, is TikTok. But TikTok's a black
Fine.
hole. My dad is the biggest TikTok fan, believe it or not. 60 plus years
Lou?
old. He scrolls TikTok. Yeah, Big Lou is
Oh,
all about
man.
TikTok. Loves it. He shares videos with me, and like you said, I'm not on TikTok, so I can't click the video. I usually he's not listening. I just click haha on the video, react to it because I can't click it because I don't have a TikTok account, and they won't let you watch on the browser, which is clever marketing on their end because sometimes you get so frustrated. I'll just download the goddamn app and I'll wind up watching it, but I won't do it. I have Instagram Reels for that reason as well.
Yeah, I don't need any more social media in my life. It's takes up enough time right now, that's for sure.
All right. Without further ado, let's hop right into the conversation and get into our opening say. All All right, for opening say here, of course, we have some sad news to report here since we last joined you. The baseball world, of course, is mourning the loss of Mr. Baseball Bob Uecker, a beloved figure who passed away at 90 years old. He's been battling small cell lung cancer since early 2023. And this marks an end of an era for the Milwaukee Brewers and really just baseball at large. His voice has been synonymous with the Milwaukee Brewers for over 54 years. He's been in it as soon as this year. We saw him make the final call for the final out of the Brewers season last year. Not only a legendary broadcaster, but really, as we've seen the outpouring of love, Devin, just a cherished personality that the humor and storytelling transcended the sport of baseball and just made him a larger than life character.
Yeah, transcended is the right word. Maybe the most well-liked person, not just in sports, the most well-liked person I can think of out of all the reactions. Obviously, anytime someone passes away, you hear about mostly the good. But it's just the outpouring of people saying how much they're going to miss him and what a big personality and what a good person he was as well. You mentioned him being sick here for a while. I've read so many stories about Bob Uecker over the last couple of days, but some of his coworkers were saying there's a lot of days in his last couple years. He worked right until the very end, but there were a lot of days there where he would be getting treatment throughout the day and then show up to the ballpark and announce a game like nothing ever happened. And he had to be in some discomfort and some pain. So I mean, a baseball lifer, a guy that was completely and admittedly in love with the game, saying like it's the best thing he ever did, playing baseball. And that personality, man, that dry humor, that deadpan humor, and the self-deprecating humor. I tweeted about him after you did, and I reposted your tweet. It's just saying, like, I almost feel like that type of humor is kind of being lost as that generation kind of leaves us. Very much reminds me personally of one of my grandfathers who has been gone for over 10 years now. Same kind of humor. And it's just like you wouldn't know he was joking until you kind of started seeing that little grin start to come. And then, of course, you knew there was going to be some line at the end to get you. But like I said, a lot of stories I've been reading. Obviously, a lot of people just know him from Major League, which, funny enough, I read a few people say they asked him about that, and he claimed he had never watched it back. Like he came up with the lines on the fly. Yeah, he came up with the lines on the fly. Like a lot of it wasn't scripted. And when he was done with it, he never watched it back. Meanwhile, tons of us have watched this movie time and time and time again and still quote it to this day, obviously. But I will say, if anyone's looking for good stories, there's plenty out there. But Jonathan Lucroy, former Major League catcher, once a Brewer, played for some other teams as well, apparently was pretty close with Uecker and has been sharing lots of different stories, I guess, as they come to him for the last few days. Christian Yelich had some very heartfelt statements about Uecker as well. It's just really cool to see the relationship that he had with players of all different generations throughout his career. And especially, I thought it was really cool to see the relationship he had with these younger guys in the last 10 years.
And just how heartfelt the relationship with, you mentioned Christian Yelich, that's the one that caught my eye as well. Tears going down his face talking about Uecker and just what he meant to not only baseball but to him personally. And you mentioned generations have passed. We're gonna play some calls in between our meat of the order segment and opening say, where he's Robin Yount is getting calls from him, and just like how much baseball he's witnessed and how much baseball he's been a part of. And there was an Instagram picture, speaking of social media, that said that Bob Uecker has called 3.4% of every baseball game that's happened. And that just kind of resonated with me a little bit. I'm not sure how accurate that is, but I want to believe it. You know what I mean? Like that's the type of stuff.
Yeah, it's one of those.
Him and Vince Scully are the voices of baseball to me. And they're two of a generation that you can look at it through the lens of we're going to have other great talent that maybe aren't even born yet in the world of broadcasting, but we know they're going to be influenced, and they should be, by the contributions of someone like Bob Uecker and someone that really loved the game of baseball, because you can't fake that. And that's something that you see in all the conversations. Every time he went to the ballpark calling these games, he loved and respected the game of baseball. And that's all you can ask for from your broadcasters, to have a reverence for the game. And that's, to me, every time you hear him get behind a mic, whether it was at age 35 or age 85, he was able to bring that passion for first and foremost. And I love that, he crosses over different levels of entertainment. You mentioned the time as Harry Doyle in Major League and what he brought there, but you can always go back to the Tonight Show and the appearances he made there, and Mr. Belvedere, and also, a WWE Legends Hall of Famer that he coming out there, and the appearances at WrestleMania where I posted the picture of Andre the Giant choking him and telling Andre to get his foot off his shoulder, but it's his big giant hand. I mean, photos too gives me chills thinking about, Milwaukee's really cold right now, obviously in the winter months, and they're talking about all the Miller Lights that are stacked outside of his 2 statues by Miller Park, and they're like, oh, we might have to remove him because he wouldn't want them freezing over. It's just, I mean, he's inducted in the Hall of Fame in 2023, and spoiler alert, we will play our outro for the show, the final moments of that speech where he talks about his love and passion for baseball. And I think, what the Brewers said, the heartfelt statement they put out there, they called him the heart and soul of Wisconsin. And I think by expressing that feeling, not just the Brewers, but for baseball at large.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Another thing, like fiercely loyal. He had opportunities to do other things that a lot of people would consider bigger than Milwaukee. He was a star, like you said, that transcended baseball. We know that George Steinbrenner tried to get him over to be the Yankees guy, and he declined. He was loyal to Milwaukee, which is another really cool thing about him, and it's something we probably don't see enough of in any walk of life at this point. So yeah, I mean, all good things for Bob Uecker. Lived a long, unbelievable life. He's the kind of guy you could just go search his name on YouTube and probably be entertained for hours watching different clips. Like, honestly, or sometimes I was entertained by an interview of someone else talking about him. Norm Macdonald's, Artie Lang on the Howard Stern show years ago. I guess Norm actually was very good friends with him, and they shared some thoughts and some stories, a little more R-rated stories than some of the other stuff. But I don't have any Miller Lite, and I don't usually drink when we record, but I am cracking open a beer just in honor of Bob Uecker. Cheers to him. Cheers to his legacy and all the people that will miss him dearly, for sure.
So as we transition to our meet of the order, we're going to play a minute and 30 of some of his best calls. Not all of his calls, of course. There's so many to pick from, but this is a good compilation of some of the best moments of him behind the mic. Let's listen.
Arm is back. Here he comes. 1-2. Swing and a miss. Goodbye, Detroit. Hello, New York. Hi, Raleigh Fingers. What a job he is being mobbed by his teammates as the Brewers have come from behind today to beat Detroit by a score of 2-1. Oh, what a victory today for this Milwaukee Brewer Ball Club. And Milwaukee will face New York for the American League Eastern Division Championship. 2 balls, 2 strikes, 1 out. The stretch. Jackson leads the pitch. Is hit over Cooper's head to right, a base hit. Here is Reggie turning second, trying for third. Moore's going to have a play on him. The throw in time to get Jackson. Oh, what a throw by Moore. Oh, what a throw by Charlie Moore. He was right on line to Molitor, and Molly was waiting for Jackson when he got there. I want to tell you, folks, nobody in this league has played better in right field than Charlie Moore has this year. Gantner, there he goes. The pitch, a swing and a fly ball, right field and deep. Get up and get out of here. Gone for Swaim, and they've done it again. 12 in a row on a 2-run blast by Swaim to win it. Oh, my goodness. Holy.
All right, as we transition back into the offseason, the hot stove, the team leading the conversation continues to be the Los Angeles Dodgers, and they made a major move by signing Japan's top pitching prospect, Roki Sasaki, to a deal featuring a $6.5 million signing bonus. We've been discussing Roki all offseason, Devin, about his triple-digit fastball, the splitter we're all excited to see in the major leagues, all the numbers from Nippon Professional Baseball. He joins the rotation that already includes Yamamoto, Blake Snell, potentially Shohei Ohtani if he gets on the hill again this year. He is yet another weapon for the Dodgers pitching depth. And we can talk about the Dodgers and what this means for them, but I also want to start a little bit here with the brutal blow to the San Diego Padres and also the Toronto Blue Jays, both of whom who were heavily involved in this pursuit. They were the 2 finals as we discussed last week. And the Padres in particular are left with a hole in their rotation they were hoping to fill with Roki. And this hurts even further because he's going to their division and they're going to be seeing a whole lot of him. And the Blue Jays, dude, are left to regroup after missing out on yet another high-profile free agent. What else is new?
Yeah. So I'll start with the Padres here. Yeah, obviously hurts them the most being a division rival. They knew they weren't doing a ton this offseason because it seems like, they're in this ownership battle now and they may be looking to cut payroll, but Roki seemed like something that was attainable. And to be honest, if they were able to sign Roki, I think that motivates them a little bit more to stay aggressive, not so much as in signing other people, but maybe not selling the guys you have, right? Like, how can you bring a guy like Roki in and be like, all right, well, now we're going to trade Dylan Cease, or now we're going to move somebody else like that? That's pretty tough to do. And I do wonder a little bit if Roki got a whiff of like, hey, they're looking to cut payroll. Like, yeah, they want you, but as far as competitive, I don't know. So yeah, it hurts them big time. And I'm very curious to see what they do from here. Will they actually try to add to the roster? Will it be small moves around the edges? Will they look to move a bigger piece like a Dylan Cease who has been rumored out there, which will then obviously take them further away from the Dodgers? I don't really know what to expect from the Padres. And quick cheap plug here. We're talking to the Divine Sports Gospel this coming Wednesday night. Will be released Thursday. And we're going to ask them what their gut feeling is right now as people close to San Diego sports, what direction you go now. And then as far as the Blue Jays, I mean, what can be said that has not already been said over and over and over? Always the bridesmaid. I mean, I guess it's great that they're always in it, but you kind of feel at this point that they may just be being used most of the time.
So you mentioned being used, and I think the Marines posting Roki Sasaki for MLB teams last month, Major League Baseball did conduct an investigation to ensure the proper protocol has been followed. And there's been people talking about, as you said, the Blue Jays and the Padres being put out there as this bachelor situation to hide the truth of there's been collusion all along. He's always known he's been going to the Dodgers, and you won't prove to me otherwise. It feels like that. It feels like this decision was made months and months ago, and it's Roki's decision to make. If he wants to go play for LA, and that's
Right.
a conversation we're going to continue to have with the other free agent that they did sign and all of that, but MLB found no wrongdoing. And I think looking at the preferences and the concern we originally had was the low financial incentive from the Marines in the current posting system, which prompted speculation that there might be some under the table payments that no one's calculating. Maybe the Dodgers are paying them under the table. The fact that he's being posted early leaves people looking at why the Marines not have an issue with him being posted. Because a lot of this for the Nippon Professional Baseball League, they lose stars. Then let's not mistake it. Roki Sasaki is as much of a star there as he would be here. And he was a huge loss for them. So the fact that they're not trying to hold on, and we complimented them early on when they said they're doing this, but the more you think about it, they put up no fight of saying like, no, we're going to have to hold you on until, similar to Yamamoto, where they got a big piece of the pie when Yamamoto signed with the Dodgers. And the fact that Roki left, maybe there was some undocumented money that went there. And that's a deep accusation being made. But at this point, it's hard not to feel like there's something going on, especially with that situation that went down with Roki. And then I really believe, I mean, conspiracy theory or not, that the Dodgers right now are creating an environment to lure free agents to come here. And I'm not sure how that can be fixed. I'm not sure how other teams can compete with that, because it's clearly not just about financials anymore. It's not just about the money they can pay. It's about the culture they're creating. And you mentioned the stuff with the Padres. Those things all sort of wrap into this package of wanting to play there. And Roki clearly wants to be part of what they're building and continue to build there in a winning culture. And you can't guarantee that anywhere else. I mean, Dodgers are the most guaranteed chance you have at winning a World Series ring in 2025. There's no doubt about it. And we can sit here and be upset about it. And I sure am. I'm upset that this is happening because I don't think it's good for baseball to have the stars all congregating in one spot. But I think narrowing his choices to the Dodgers, the Padres, and the Blue Jays, it felt like a foregone conclusion that he was going to wind up there. And the interesting thing, and we were posting about this in our group chat, is the Blue Jays went out of their way trading Miles Straw for this bonus international money. It feels dirty if he wasn't ever going to go there. They left him at the altar, and they made financial and roster moves that are going to affect them in the future. And if Roki never was going to go there, that's the real crime of all this. If you were just playing the Blue Jays, now the Blue Jays are left holding the bag at the altar, and now they're going to continue to pursue upgrades and make their team better. But this feels like everybody else was a pawn in this game, and the Dodgers are playing chess, and Roki is right there with them.
Yeah. As far as that trade, I mean, I sent it in the group chat as soon as I saw it with like the eyes emoji, like, oh man, they just got some international pool money. Like, what does that mean? They're one of the last two. Are they really going to upset this whole thing and be the guys that get Sasaki? And obviously, in hindsight, the move looks awful, awful. Mike Wilner, one of our very first guests on this show, Toronto Star writer, he and former broadcaster, by the way, very close to the Blue Jays. He did not hold back on his podcast or on his Twitter about how awful this move was in so many ways. Like he said, he didn't fault them for going after Sasaki or anything like that, but the way they went about this is just pretty rough. So, yeah, Blue Jays seemed like they're going to Blue Jay. Blue Jays going to Blue Jay. We used the White Sox as a verb last year, and I think the Blue Jays, they're kind of becoming a verb in their own way as well. Yeah, I mean, as far as the investigation you mentioned, just to comment on that, I mean, quickest investigation ever. I'm sorry, but it is hard, and we're gonna really dive deep into this, and there's more because the Tanner Scott news came today. But just a quick comment before we go deeper is it's very hard to not get the ick a little bit with the Dodger MLB Japan situation. Last year started with the Shohei Ohtani story. And again, these are not accusations coming from me, but the mind wanders a little bit, right? Like, I don't know if we'll ever really know what actually happened there because for a few days, the evidence seemed to point towards one thing. And then all of a sudden, the story was changed. And you got to wonder about that. And then you move on from that. And you got to remember, like, Shohei is the golden boy. Like, the NBA has been accused of doing things for Michael Jordan to make sure he didn't get too far in trouble. A lot of people think that he went and played baseball to avoid getting in trouble, right? And then coming back. That's another story. But, like, you could make a little bit of an equivalent Shohei. I guess we won't ever know. But now you have this situation where a podcast like ours that started back in March on our like second episode, we were able to read enough things to have a conversation about like, is Roki Sasaki already a Dodger? Like we had that conversation. So there has been plenty of evidence connecting him to the Dodgers for a long, long time. And was that just his own interest or was it just Shohei and Yamamoto? Or was it more than that? There is precedence that in 2016, Adrian Gonzalez, who was no longer a Dodger but was connected with them, went over and like provided gifts to Shohei Ohtani at the time, who ended up not signing with them at the time. And the Dodgers were fined for doing things inappropriately. And you just wonder, like this type of like, let's not be naive here. This kind of stuff happens in sports all the time. It happened in college sports constantly. Right. And which is kind of why they've gone to the NIL deals because they couldn't control it. So the mind will always wonder. And like I said, I think there's a lot of us that have a little bit of the ick there. But before we go too far, Tanner Scott is the most, unless there's anything else you want to say about Roki specifically, or can we keep going here?
Let's keep going with Tanner Scott because it's all tied together in this bigger. I think you use the 3-letter word of ick. That's what it feels like because it feels like there's something avoidable for Major League Baseball. And we're obviously not Dodger fans, but there is something about the way this feels that inevitably, I'm not saying Manfred has to step in and stop free agents from making choices of where to sign because I wouldn't want that. But there has to be a way to fix the collaboration in free agency to make it not so one-sided. Because looking at the additions to an already World Series bound roster that had injuries, by the way, they're not only going to get the acquisitions they had in free agency, they're going to get all the guys that they lost via injury and really didn't lose much as far as free agency goes. I mean, Walker Buehler disappeared, but that's pretty much it on their end. And they're obviously a much better team as we sit here a few months after October where they won a World Series. And I'm not sure that's good for baseball. And I think a lot of the conversations, it's not just about money being spent. We'll talk about that because we also have other teams chiming in about money being spent because it's not about that anymore. And conversations and people were like, well, you as a Yankee fan, how do you complain? Because the Yankees are putting together teams in the 90s that were similar to this. And that's not the case. It doesn't feel this way. The Yankees didn't hit a home run on every free agent. They weren't able to get everybody. Even when the Yankees were the Yankees, when they still were the big bad George Steinbrenner Yankees, they weren't getting everybody. It feels like the Dodgers, when they put any sort of interest towards anybody, they're able to get it done. And I'm not sure if that's just their head and shoulders that much better than every other franchise or something else going on that is avoidable that other franchises are not able to compete with? I'm not sure what it is.
Okay, well, there's multiple things going on here. So first of all, the Tanner Scott news kind of put people over the edge because let's not remember Kim, the second baseman from Korea, signed kind of surprisingly with the Dodgers just a couple weeks ago. Then Roki, that was kind of expected. Like we all rolled our eyes because they were, saying other teams were involved, and we all kind of crossed our fingers like not the Dodgers, not the Dodgers, not the Dodgers. But when it happened, we were like, yeah, we all kind of knew that was going to happen. But the Kim stuff, and then Tanner Scott today, 4 years, $72 million. This is another guy I didn't know the Dodgers were even honestly too involved with. So again, it was just like, it's not that Tanner Scott himself is like, oh man, Dodgers got him. He's a 30-year-old reliever. He had the one really amazing year. Who knows if he can keep that up? And if he can't, I mean, that money for that guy is a hell of a waste. But again, you took him away from the Padres. If he can do anything close to what he did last year, like it's such a huge weapon. But there are multiple parts to this that are pissing people off. Let me start with this. The seemingly lockstep, the reporters are seemingly in lockstep with each other of saying, like, the Dodgers aren't ruining baseball. The bigger problem is that your teams aren't spending any money and they should just do what the Dodgers do. So let me just comment on a little bit of that, first of all. I honestly don't blame the Dodgers for what they're doing. They are exploiting things right now within the rules, apparently, unless there is some kind of unforeseen stuff we don't know about. But by all means, it seems like they are playing within the rules. My problem is the rules. And now it's getting to a point of, like you said, some of these guys are turning down less money just to go play at the LA Country Club and jump on the boat. It just reminds me of all the things I hated about the NBA for the last 10 or 15 years of the super teams. And honestly, let's be honest, we didn't see the effects of that right away, but now all you hear about the NBA is ratings sinking. And they're mostly blaming the style of play. But there's a little bit of that too, man. NBA was on fire in the 90s because all the superstars were spread out amongst the league, and it was so fun, like a bunch of alpha guys. All of a sudden, I'm starting to see this country club, super team, Kevin Durant kind of attitude in Major League Baseball, and I hate it because I never felt like my sport was like that, even in the days of the powerful Yankees. I grew up on that shit as a Mets fan, and I hated it, and I complained about it all the time, but I don't remember getting the same feeling I'm getting now. And step one is the reporters just basically telling all the rest of us to shut up. Like, no, you shut up. I don't know if you're on the payroll too. I can't stand it. And I'm talking about guys that I usually like. Jeff Passan, glazing the Dodgers as much as possible, usually a favorite of mine. I mean, guys I've always hated. Ben Verlander, of course, a big Shohei Ohtani guy. He's on there. Alana Rizzo, who used to be on High Heat with Mad Dog. She's a Dodger person as well. But like, quit telling the rest of us to be quiet about this. Do not try to convince us that it's an even playing field. And this is coming from a Met fan and a Yankee fan, myself and you. We understand our teams have plenty of power to do a lot of this stuff. The problem is, as a league, don't try to convince us that all 30 teams are on a level playing field. Yes, there are plenty of teams that are not spending nearly enough, like the Pirates or the Marlins, things like that. I get that. And we can talk about a salary floor. To me, that is another conversation. That is what we see in politics a lot, which is what I call whataboutism. It's like, oh, we're complaining all these things about what's happening with the Dodgers. Well, what about the Pirates not spending money? No. That's a false equivalency. Like, I am not talking about the Pirates being a shitty franchise right now. The Dodgers are by no means the only good or well-run franchise in Major League Baseball. I refuse to believe that. Get out of here with that. So I'm going to break this down into a few things, and we can talk about each. First of all, the thing that people don't talk about enough is saying that other teams can do this. I don't see another Shohei Ohtani walking around that is willing to take $2 million a year during his actual playing days and defer $68 million a year. Like, the Mets just signed Juan Soto for $50 freaking million a year that they have to pay him now. Like, don't compare these things. There's no player like Shohei Ohtani. And it just so happens the one Shohei Ohtani in the world has agreed to just take $2 million a year, and the other $68 million a year, you can give me down the road, which may screw the Dodgers over in 10 years from now. I kind of, sorry, LA fans, hope it does. But that's number one. the amount of opportunities that him doing that has opened up for the Dodgers is unbelievable. And again, because of the rules, the Dodgers didn't do anything wrong, but this needs to be addressed. 2 million out of 70, that cannot be allowed. That absolutely, positively cannot be allowed. In the next CBA, it has to be talked about. We're talking about lockouts now, which already is making me stressed. Like, I don't want that to happen. But you can make this something easy. 75% of the contract has to be delivered now. Or if we're going to have a salary cap, even if they're deferments, they still count towards the salary cap. Like, one of those two can be a solution. So that's number one. No, we're not on even footing because nobody else has a Shohei Ohtani taking insane deferments. As a team, $1.4 billion in deferments. Like, I know everybody can defer, but we are not the same. That's number one. So give me your thoughts on that, and then I'll go to my next thing on this list because there is a list.
Well, the thing I was to bring up is all the things about the money coming in, and you talk about equal playing field, and we talked about the uncertainty last week about the TV deals for teams like the Reds and the teams like the Twins. But if you go back to the deal signed back in 2014 with Spectrum Sportsnet LA, $8.35 billion over 25 years. That's good for $334 million per year, which again, good for them. They signed that deal, but with the deferred money included in that, they have an endless supply of money to be able to print and sign whatever player they want. And I agree with you. I completely agree with you that there's a problem with the deferment money. They're exposing a situation similar to what we saw during the steroid era, where there is gray area, where they're not breaking the rules, but they're certainly skating on that line of making people have the conversation like, should this be allowed? And right now, I mean, they're pushing the limit on this luxury tax, and the luxury tax was supposed to be, I would say, a soft salary cap to get people to not spend as much and give the equal playing ground for some of these other teams that don't have the equal income that the big markets do. But it's operating like they're making a mockery of it at this point with the amount of money that is above it. And with the idea, if Shohei was being actually paid what he should be being paid on an annual basis, it would be a completely different conversation. They would not be able to have the flexibility to make these a 4-year, $72 million contract with Tanner Scott, left-handed reliever that is going to be key for their postseason push, a player that easily could be elsewhere. And I think if Shohei was able, if they couldn't defer the money from Shohei, couldn't defer the money from all these other contracts, they would have no ability to sign a guy for $72 million over 4 years like Tanner Scott. And I think that conversation continues to be had. There needs to be a solution to this deferment because it starts to pile on each other. When we first heard about the contract where Shohei was highly touted after, and everyone's like, where is Shohei going to go? And it makes sense for him to go to LA. I think it'd be a good fit because of the star power. And we love the Dodgers as a fit. Looks clean in that uniform. But they shouldn't be able to pay him at a bear market. Like, it makes you start to think, and I understand accusations and conspiracy theory. Why? Why is he taking that amount of money? Why is he the only player willing to do that? And I think the Players Association should get involved and have that conversation as well. How can that be good for the free agent class out there while Pete Alonso is trying to scrape every coin together for his free agency? And you have Shohei Ohtani who's setting bad precedent. These players get held to a high standard as far as setting the market for the deal and understand they got to get the maximum amount of money out there. Why is Shohei Ohtani able to do what he's doing by deferring? And I understand he's getting money and he's going to be paid until he's 75 years old. But this has to be a conversation of fixing this because it's a problem that was exposed by the Dodgers, a problem we didn't know that we actually had in the first place.
Yeah, and the other thing is you kind of alluded to it a little bit, like, but the TV money. So I'm not going to compare them to a small market team. I'm going to compare them to the Yankees. So the TV money, they make way more than anybody. The last statistic I saw, I don't know whether it's from 2024 or 2023, $334 million per season compared to the Yankees, $143 million. It's a major difference between the Dodgers and the almighty Yankees. Like that's kind of staggering. Now, I will say the Yankees 2024 revenue was actually better than the Dodgers, $679 million. Just to be fair here, the Dodgers $549 million. But revenue is not necessarily the be all end all. There is, like, you do have to look at the actual profit or the operating income. And if we look at that a little more, there was a great thread on Twitter from PHX fans, and I kind of had to double check to make sure this is legitimate. So I did my checking here, my fact checking. So the Dodgers made just $26 million last season on revenues of $549 million. So they brought it, even though they have $549 million of revenue, you're spending a lot of that on other stuff, whether it be payroll, fixing the ballpark, this, and that. So end all be all, $26 million kind of take home. That's a profit margin of just 4.7%, despite having the league's second highest revenue. But if you look among the league, not a lot of teams are actually making profits, which is why immediately poking a hole in well, everybody's a billionaire owner, so you can all do this. No, not necessarily. So 6 teams lost money back in 2023. These are where these numbers are from, the 2023 season. The Mets in 2023 lost $292 million when all was said and done. Obviously, they had some really bad contracts, things like that. Padres lost $116 million. The Blue Jays lost $45 million. The White Sox, $28 million. The Rockies lost $16 million. The Athletics lost $11 million that year. 6 teams made less than $20 million take home, including the Yankees, who only brought home $2.1 million after all was said and done. Phillies, $19 million. Angels, $15. Rangers, $12. Twins, $19. Tigers, $17. So if you dig a little deeper, you'll see some of these numbers are not necessarily what you expect them to be. So 12 of Major League Baseball's 30 teams that either lost money or made less than $20 million in profit back in 2023. The Dodgers made $26 million in profit while owing 8 players more than $1 billion in deferred money from 2028 to 2046. Big span. It's already over $55.5 million per year in deferred money. So they're basically abusing their credit card. That is what they're doing. How can you not hear those numbers and be like, whoa, how is Major League Baseball even letting them do this? And some people think it's they just know they're eventually going to pass it on to other owners, and basically they're going to be fucked. I don't know who's going to want to buy it if that's the case, but I don't know. This is all kind of forecasting, which is very difficult. It's a very intricate subject, but I thought that was interesting to share. So between the deferred money, the media gaslighting all of us, which is what they're doing, the amount of TV money that makes a difference. The other thing that I think is worth talking about is some other teams that had involvement in this, because this is where I will take a step back and admit, you know what, this is not just the Dodgers, this is not Major League Baseball. There are some other teams that let this happen. The Angels are number one. If you look at them, and this is kind of more of a conversation, a little bit in jest, less serious than the others, but if they didn't do such a shitty job of being able to win with Shohei Ohtani and Mike Trout in their prime, this whole story ends up different, most likely. So they're number one. The Braves let Freddie Freeman walk out the door. Maybe the biggest people that had something in this that helped the Dodgers. The Red Sox gave Mookie Betts away instead of trying to lock him up long term. And they did that to a few other guys as well. So Tyler Glasnow came from the Rays, who didn't want to pay him because they never want to pay a superstar. They I give a little more of an excuse because they kind of have to operate like that. But something like the Red Sox, right? The Braves, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's Freddie Freeman's agent that kind of screwed that thing up more so than anything else. But so the CBA will be super interesting to me to see what happens there. But the last part of this, and maybe the most important part of the conversation, right along with deferred money, the international players. This system, I think, is a bit broken. In every other league that I can think of, I'm thinking of basketball mostly, but the international players are a part of the draft. Why are they not in the draft? I heard someone bring this up on I think it was one of the ESPN radio guys, and he said that's what I want. I want an international. He said he wanted a separate international player draft. I just want them to be in the draft, and don't tell me they can't figure that out, because they can as far as timing goes. I know that will be the first argument people have, but basketball, these international guys are all over the draft. Their names are all over the draft. Why can they not be a part of the draft? And the immediate argument as well is usually, well, if they know they're going to come to, let's say, the Pirates, maybe they're just not going to come here. That's going to go away after time. Eventually they're going to get used to it. If they want to play on the biggest stage, they will come play on the biggest stage, and they can make their money later, just like a Paul Skeens, right? Do we think he's going to be a Pirate forever? Probably not, but he's going to put in his time there because that's the team he has to be loyal to right now that is giving him his first shot. So, why are they not in the drafts or a drafts?
Well, then that's infuriating to me. You mentioned the gaslighting and the glazing of all these national writers and local writers. to this Shohei Ohtani deferment and eventually everything that's going on with Roki Sasaki and the Dodgers and saying they're doing nothing wrong, is that the edict sent out by everybody, whether it was CBA time for negotiation, was always about the small market teams feeling that we want to maintain financial parity across every franchise. We want to make sure everyone has a chance to compete. Where if you look at this right now and everyone's supporting it, saying that they encourage it, it sets the precedent and it further widens the gap between the haves and have-nots. And I don't understand how we can look at that and say that's a good thing for baseball. These same writers that are looking at all the and applauding when the Braves lock up their franchise players and applauding when guys get to take team-friendly deals because it helps and liking to see these smaller market teams spending money are in fact supporting this. We need to speak out and say this is not good for baseball, because even looking at the Ohtani contract, which I think is our biggest gripe with this, because it's not just specifically Roki, it's not specifically Yamamoto, it's all this package put together of them creating this superpower that has been made on this gray area of lack of rules and exploiting loopholes. That's what it is right now. And I think the structure will continue to spark debate until there is resolution. There is financial ethics that take place here, that we're going to have teams that, future owners or whatever down the line that are having to pay the credit card bill, as you put so perfectly. There is long-term effects, not just for the Dodgers, but for Major League Baseball's economic landscape that we have to continue to look at, because this is setting bad precedent that other teams, especially those that have more resources at their fingertips, to exploit. And that's what the Dodgers are doing right now. They're exploiting a system that needs so badly to be fixed. And I love your idea about having the international draft, I should say international players a part of a draft, because they right now should be. Clearly, the financial incentive is not part of this. So put him in the draft. If Roki wants to play Major League Baseball, he has to go to the draft, and he gets drafted during the season like everybody else. Pop him in there. That's where he should be. You can't have a posting fee and trading all this bogus amount of international pool money that is, to me, just like spending Monopoly money at this point. You're trading coins that don't actually exist. To me, move it around. And I think we have to figure out a way to fix it.
The whole system is problematic in a lot of different ways, not just the players that are coming from Japan. And, there's now this kind of fraternity with the Dodgers that they seem like they just want to go there. And obviously West Coast teams have always had an advantage for the players coming over from Japan, right? A lot of people want to play on the West Coast, and they can't really help that. But a draft does solve some of that, but it solves other things too. I'm going to read a couple paragraphs here, if you guys don't mind, from an article from the LA Times, I believe back in 2022. This conversation has been had before, and MLB has tried to bring it up, but there's a lot of skepticism. So this is part of it. This is a long article, but part of it, MLB has long contended an international draft could mitigate the problems plaguing the market, particularly in the DR. So it's not just Japan thing. There are two different problems, but there's problems both places, ranging from illicit early agreements between teams and 13-year-old boys to performance-enhancing drug use to unbridled corruption, while admitting it doesn't effectively police the current system. Prominent players, current and former, have expressed both caution and support. David Ortiz said he's open to the idea but worried about the implementation. Fernando Tatis Jr. said the draft would kill baseball in his country because he believes a draft would produce fewer opportunities for players. In March, Mets shortstop Francisco Lindor, a member of the union's 8-player executive subcommittee during CBA negotiations, tweeted that the international draft is about dividing players. On the other side, Venezuelans Bobby Abreu and Carlos Guillen, both of whom run academies in their home country, are among the notable advocates. Those against the draft offer different reasons, but they center their rationale around one argument. The problems in Latin America exist because teams disregard rules, knowing the league won't enforce them. The reason that they want to implement a draft is because the teams themselves corrupted the system down there so poorly, said one prominent agent who spoke on condition of anonymity. The scouts are robbing from the teams themselves. Some of the scouts write a $500,000 check to the kid, but they actually wrote $1 million offer to the organization, and they pocket the difference. This has been going on forever, so they created their own shit. That is eye-opening, because if it's going on in one place, who's to say it's not going on somewhere else? Like, if you haven't looked at this stuff, this came up a couple years ago in the CBA negotiations that were very contentious. And go back and look at some of these articles that were written back in July of 2022, specifically about the international prospect kind of stuff. It's super interesting and a little bit frustrating, I guess is the word.
And the thing is, too, this is not just a Dodgers specific thing. It just so happens the Dodgers are the aim of exposing these issues. So if this was another team doing it, the Red Sox, the Mets, the Yankees, there would be the same conversation because objectively, we want what's best for baseball. And going back to the competitive balance tax rules where the deferred money is supposed to, or I should say the money that's being taxed on top of it, if it's not deferred, is supposed to, at the very least, hold a team accountable for what they're spending. And you look at Ohtani, I keep going back to it. For tax purposes, it's not being taxed for the full amount. So if you start to dig deep about everything as far as what the Dodgers have done this year, the bulk of the money being paid after 2034 for specifically Ohtani, this is someone else in the future's problem. But right now in the present, they have taken advantage of a league that already doesn't have a salary cap. And on top of it, built upon this empire of now they have international prospects that are going here. We don't know the money that's exchanging hands as far as under the table. And again, not making accusations, but that's like similar to what Devin's saying with the Dominican Republic stuff. There is stuff that happens that are incentivized. A guy like Roki Sasaki being influenced to go to the Dodgers, whether it's conversations prior, where there shouldn't have been collusion prior, maybe there was conversations with talent that's already on the team. All these things, it's not exclusive to what the Dodgers are. It's what they represent and what they're doing themselves. This could have been any franchise, but this needs to be fixed. And I think conversationally down the line, if the Dodgers become the superpower and win 140 games, it's not this good story for baseball. You create a heel because that's what people want to say. It makes for good TV. Everyone wants to see the big bad powerhouse lose. It's becoming undeniable that the Dodgers are eventually tipping the scale to become unbeatable. And we don't want that. That's not something you want in baseball, creating a juggernaut that is unbeatable by any team, especially in an offseason where the Mets threw all this money at Juan Soto, where they feel like completely out of the stratosphere of competing with the Dodgers. And that's just unacceptable. And Steve Cohen couldn't have spent any more money than he did this offseason. He threw a record-breaking contract at Juan Soto, and we still sit here. And he's not even close. I don't think the Mets are anywhere close to where the Dodgers are. And that's not just a hating. That's a sheer fact right now.
Yeah, and like as a Met fan, I'll say don't cry any tears for the Mets. But I did say that earlier. Like as a Met fan, it's like you got Soto, it's unbelievable, and you still look at the rosters and are like, I probably shouldn't be able to compete with these guys. I understand baseball is weird. I get it. We got to play the games on the field, and by no means am I not going to watch the season because this, as some other people are playing or saying, like I'm going to watch a lot of baseball like I always do, and yeah, I'm going to root against the Dodgers like a lot of people are going to, and I think there is a case for baseball having a villain or any sport having a villain. Sometimes it's good for the game, but some of these lackadaisical rules that they're exposing right now are my problem. It's not necessarily the Dodgers themselves. It's the problem that we haven't kind of done something about this. And more so, like I said before, the media that is trying to basically tell us all to shut up. Like that is my biggest gripe right now. I will say one more thing on the Roki stuff. You can't convince me. I'm not saying there was collusion or tampering, but you can't convince me that they didn't do a little extra as far as the agent and the recruiting process, just to kind of try to get people off the scent of like it was always Dodgers. Like it was a little bit of a facade, like absolutely at least a little bit of a facade. Some of that stuff, like, oh, he might want to play in a small market. Come on, miss me with that stuff. That's very clear. The last thing, just a little bit of a debate, not a debate, but a question of actual baseball on the field instead of the outside rules. The other debate is like, is this the best team on paper we've ever seen? So I tried to look back and basically find who are some of the best baseball teams ever assembled. I'm not going to compare them way back to like Murderers Row and stuff like that. I'm trying to compare them to baseball that I've seen in my lifetime. So the 1998 New York Yankees came up. And one thing I will say that is eye-opening, and again, it's a different era, a different type of baseball, but that roster, I mean, it's comparable. So Chuck Knobloch, Derek Jeter, Paul O'Neill, Bernie Williams, Tino Martinez, Darryl Strawberry, not the same Darryl Strawberry who's played on the Mets, though, I'll say that. Chad Curtis, there's no Chad Curtis on the Dodgers, I'll say that. Jorge Posada, Scott Brocious, not Boris, Brocious. The pitching staff is a star-studded pitching staff. I will still say it's not nearly what the Dodgers have, in my opinion. You're the Yankee fan. David Wells, Andy Pettitte, David Cohn, Orlando Hernandez, Hideki Irabu, and then a very good bullpen with guys like Mariano, Ramiro Mendoza ahead of him, Jeff Nelson, Mike Stanton. And I would say on paper, obviously the games have to be played. On paper, I think the Dodgers are better on paper. Obviously, that Yankees team, as well as other Yankee teams around that time, had a crazy amount of success. The reason I chose them, that specific Yankee team, 114 wins. And how about this? A 309 run differential. 309. So I had to look back and see, like, all right, well, what did the Dodgers have last year? I do think this year's Dodgers team is going to be significantly better. But the Dodgers last year, their run differential, just make sure I get it right, plus 156. So, like, not even in the same stratosphere. So, like, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that Yankee team is or was way better than this Dodger team is going to be. But I don't know. I don't feel like I've ever seen anything like this. Even looking back at a team like the 98 Yankees.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say because like 98 is different than 2025 and the way baseball is played. And I think a
Right.
lot of the have-nots in baseball in 98 were very much egregiously lower. I think looking at those teams, there were really good teams, but there were also really bad teams. And I think a lot of the
I
teams in
mean,
2020, no, you're right in that way, but I think a
White
lot of the
Sox,
bad teams,
Marlins.
but it's all relative is my point, where even though you're
I
losing
agree.
games, you're still playing at a higher level because you have access to new information. And that is a butterfly effect conversation. But very put appropriately by the Divine Sports Gospel we're going to have on Wednesday, airing on Thursday, audio and video. They have a shirt that says "Vibes Above Replacement." And I think that's what the Yankees had in '98. Is they had this culture of play today, win today, like they had in 1996, but also continued that throughout this whole run where the Yankees were going to find a way to pull through. And yes, they had free agents on that team. Yes, Paul O'Neill wasn't drafted by the Yankees. Yes, Tino Martinez wasn't drafted by the Yankees, but these weren't these highly touted free agents that everybody had to throw all this money at. These were guys that fit a certain role in the Yankees. And that's going to be interesting to watch for the Dodgers. They're inevitably going to win the NL West. They're going to probably be in the final four of the, unless things go amazingly awry for them, they're going to wind up in the championship series again. But it will be interesting to see how all these players fit their role. Where will these guys slot in, whether it's the rotation or the position players? Where will all these players find a role? And they found a way last year because of the injuries that everyone kind of played their part. But we haven't seen this fully realized Death Star that is the Los Angeles Dodgers fully realized. And everyone continues to talk about the good. We know how good they'll be. But sometimes, I don't know, maybe there's not going to be the role for everybody because everyone doesn't fit on this roster. Someone has to step back. I don't
Yeah.
believe that's the case. That to me is like silver lining of maybe the Dodgers won't be as good as we want them to be. But yeah, I think what the Dodgers, you can't compare it to the 98 vibes that the Yankees had, but maybe they'll create that. They need that glue player right now, and maybe it winds up being someone we don't know who it's going to be. Maybe there's a guy out there on this roster that winds up being called up that, maybe it's Pajes. Like he's going to come up and play and be that guy who's the glue guy. Because right now it's a whole bunch of superstars that would be the franchise player on every single team in this league. And they have 6 of them right now. And that's a true fact. They got 6 or 7 guys that would be the franchise player on any other team in baseball. And that's just a true fact.
Yeah. I mean, I know we got to move off the Dodgers here and get to a couple other things, but I will say some breaking, at least I'm pretty sure it's breaking news here. Update on the Roki Sasaki stuff. Apparently, the Dodgers had made a small trade with the Phillies and the Phillies sent them some international bonus pool money to help with the Roki Sasaki signing. So that's interesting. I wouldn't see the Phillies as someone who would want to help the Dodgers, but obviously they got something back. I would have to look more into what their return was as well. I'll just say one more thing. My final thought, there's probably gonna be more. This has been cathartic because this is, again, I've been reading too much of the media stuff that's really on getting under my skin, or Dodger fans that are just like, everybody can do this. Like, tell your owner to spend more. I'm so tired of it. The one thing I don't want to hear this year, if the Dodgers do well, which they will, I don't want to hear anything about Dave Roberts being this amazing manager. Okay? Because you could go to any zoo and pick any animal and put him in a Dodger uniform and throw him in there and, help him write the lineup card, right? And they'll win the same amount of games. So don't tell me that. If Dave Roberts ever wants to prove that he's great, go to a team like the White Sox, add like 5 or 10 wins to their win total, and then I'll be like, wow, that'll impress me way more than anything you do with the Dodgers. The one thing I will say that is kind of cool, that they are a failure anything short of a World Series win. Like, there has never been as big of a World Series or bust here. If you don't win the World Series, you're a laughing stock. You could win 125 games, sweep through the playoffs and then lose the World Series, we are all going to point and laugh. And I know you could go right back there again next year. I get it. That's the truth. It is the truth for the Dodgers this year. If I'm a Dodger fan, like especially a casual, am I watching the Dodgers all season long, or am I just turning them on in October? Like seriously, it's a legitimate question.
Yeah, and the thing is too, you got to ask the Dodgers fans, like, is this fun anymore? When does it stop being fun? And maybe it hasn't stopped yet. Maybe the winning that will continue, but I think there needs to be some resistance to this as well, because I think as Dodger fans, they have to see a little bit. I mean, they would be upset if, let's just say, the Houston Astros were doing the exact same thing. They'd be the first person on the front line saying that's unfair. They are abusing the system. The Dodger fans were the same ones that, were pointing fingers at when the Astros were bending the rules themselves. And, I think obviously we all in agreement that the Astros deserved that and much more punishment that they got. But at the same time, the Astros were bending rules that weren't in existence, that they created protocol because of what the Astros were doing at that time. And that's a conversation that will continue. Maybe we look at this 2024, 2025, 2026 Dodgers team of, remember a time when you were allowed to do that? That's crazy because you're not allowed to do it anymore. Remember the Dodgers were bending the rules by deferring 98% of Shohei Ohtani's contract, the best player in the world. That's an insane
putting him on
move.
layaway. Like,
yeah, exactly.
But
we'll talk about the Dodgers further and foremost. We're always going to be at the tip of everybody's tongues. But as you said, this was cathartic and therapeutic to have a conversation about this. Because as you said, the glazing of the national writers and a lot of these Dodgers fans pulling up their swords for the team, the Dodgers, they don't need your support. They're going to go out there and win a lot of games, but at least have some reasoning and objectivity to your conversations about the Dodgers and try to see it through a lens of the rest of us. And it's coming from a Yankee fan and a Met fan. And I'll tell you right now, I'm critical of the Yankees. I've been on the show critical of how they do things. If the Yankees were scooping up every free agent, it's not good for baseball. There needs to be parity. As far as Paul Skeens go, I would rather see him in a Pittsburgh Pirates uniform. And that's me rocking a Yankee hat right now. That just speaks to the larger picture, because without MLB succeeding, doesn't mean shit if one team is good. I think baseball needs to be in a better spot where every team starts to eat at the table. And we're moving further and further away from that. With the luxury tax stuff, as we mentioned before, the gap was getting a little bit thinner. You're going to see the Rays compete. We have all these teams out there with the Diamondbacks going to the World Series. We don't want to get away from that. We want to continue to look at these teams as saying any team on any given year can go to the World Series and make a run. I don't want to lose sight of that. I don't want it to be down to 4 or 5 teams, even as a Yankee fan, even if my team's included in that. I think it's better when 25 to 30 teams have a shot at winning the World Series.
Yeah, when you have a season that is 162 games long, you don't want any fan to feel like it's already a foregone conclusion who's going to the World Series. You have to hook these people for a long time, for months and months and months. And for the Dodgers, they're clearly, very clearly trying, because for a long time, the Dodgers were very much like a mix of spending some money, but also using a lot of homegrown players. And I know they still have a good system, but take a look at their roster, folks. Like, this is a bunch of guys you're bringing in from other places. Like, don't try to fool anybody here. They're clearly trying to use this Shohei window to become a dynasty, and there hasn't been a dynasty in a long time in baseball. And they're trying to take every advantage, and there are a lot of advantages for them to take. And that is my problem. The CBA, man, like the next discussion with that is going to be contentious. There's a lot to talk about. I hope the conversations can start as soon as possible so a lockout can be avoided. That's how I'll end that one. We're going to talk about the Dodgers one more time before this episode ends, but more so in a vein of who can compete with them the best.
So we have the conversation about the Mets, and they did make some significant moves to strengthen their roster. Let's start with AJ Minter, 2-year, $22 million, and opt out after the first season. They also brought back Jesse Winker with a 1-year, $7.5 million deal with $1.5 million in incentives. And we also have some updates about Pete Alonso and the Mets. They reportedly have reached an impasse in contract negotiations where Alonso declined that 3-year offer from the team. And it seems like all thoughts are that he's going to wind up somewhere else. So your thoughts on what the Mets have done and have not done with Alonso?
Yeah, I mean, I have to wonder how the Dodgers' continued additions are affecting a guy like Steve Cohen, who knows he has the ability to be like, all right, well, we're going to try to keep up a little bit. I don't think you can keep up with them this season, to be honest, but I think you can add a little bit more. So let me just say this. The AJ Minter signing I like a lot. He's been very good. If you look at his career, he had one bad season. My one concern is he's coming off hip surgery. How does that affect him? But do I like signing him more than a Tanner Scott for 4 years, 72? I guess we'll find out. It's obviously a much more fiscally responsible deal. Tanner Scott is probably a little bit more of a sure thing because he's not coming off of hip surgery. But I mean, David Peterson before last year had like labrum surgery or something, a big surgery, and he came back a different guy. So maybe this is a good thing. I like the Minter signing overall. Winker, like to have him back in the fold. Good clubhouse guy. I think from the left side, I'm all about it. I like it. Don't mind that at all. So Pete is the big story. It's hard, man. I saw a poll recently of like who's most at fault, Boris and Pete or Stearns and Cohen. Listen, everybody has their part in this. We all know Pete turned down that 7-year, $158 million deal about a year and a half or 2 years ago. He did not have Boris as his agent at that time. And then at the end of the season, fired his agent and went with Boris. Boris tends to do this with not the top tier guys, but the second tier guys. He has this issue of just maybe asking for a little too much. And then you get to a point where it's like, well, what do we do now? And Stearns clearly is not the guy to play that game with. Like, listen, we just gave your client Juan Soto all the money in the world. You're not going to squeeze more out of it. Like, we told you our best offer. This is what we think. There are some stories now going around of like, oh, if they really only offered him, first we heard 3 for 90. And now I'm hearing a little bit of like, oh, it was actually like 3 for 70. If it was 3 for 70, I do get a little bit of the feeling maybe they really didn't want him all along, and they're just trying to kind of put something out there that they know he's going to deny, so it makes it look like they tried because they already have that old deal that Epler offered him that kind of gets fans on their side a little bit. I don't know. I think this whole thing is a shame. My question is, what is the pivot? Because they basically have said, all right, we're pivoting. They basically said that. I mean, Carlos Baerga came out and said that he's heard they gave Pete until Monday, tomorrow, deadline. We've heard other things that said, no, the Mets they're already moving on. But nothing's happened. So there's the Vladdy rumors. I don't think any of that happens. I think that's pie in the sky stuff. They've already came out and said they want more than what the Padres got for Soto. I mean, I don't see a way we can do that. So the question is the pivot you sign Bregman and put Vientos at first, or is the pivot you put Vientos at first and let these kids, Mauricio, Beatty, Luis Angel Acuna, eventually Jet Williams, play parts in the infields? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I know Mets fans a lot of them are going to kick and scream if the answer is the second one, even though everybody really likes a lot of these guys. I mean, Beatty's kind of worn on people a little bit, but I think everyone really likes these guys. But I also think when you're the team that got eliminated by the Dodgers in the NLCS in 6 games and you see everything they've done, yes, we signed Juan Soto, which is awesome. We took him away from the Bronx. Like, it's even more awesome. But the frustration, like we said earlier, is we did that, and you still look at the roster and you're like, well, the rotation's kind of questionable. Like, if Senga can be 2023 Senga, great. If Minaya can be 2024 Minaya, awesome. If Clay Holmes can transition to a starter, cool. These are a lot of ifs, whereas the Dodgers have definites unless of injury, which I'll say that's one other thing I meant to say before. The only thing that's short of changes to the CBA in a few years that is going to stop the Dodgers from doing what they're doing is if a bunch of guys in the rotation get elbow injuries again, because they have a long list of guys that have had Tommy John over and over and over. And eventually people are going to be like, I don't know, something they're doing there. But anyway, I'm going off track. So the Mets, yeah, I think they have 3 options. You get this done with Pete, or Bregman comes in. I don't know who else. I know people talk about Santander, but I don't know how that helps you positionally. My favorite option is Bregman at third. And I know I've been outspoken about not being a big Bregman guy, which I don't think I am. But if we're really not going to bring Pete back, give me Bregman and Vientos at first. I like the young guys, but it's such a big if when you're trying to compete with a team like the Dodgers and the Phillies and the Braves. So, yeah, your guess is as good as mine at this point.
And it seems like the Winker being brought back on the 1-year team-friendly $7.5 million deal to serve primarily as the DH was a signal that they're moving in the direction, as you mentioned, with Vientos being at first and exploring options at third, whether it includes someone from the outside or it's Beatty, Mauricio, or Acuna. It remains to be seen. But it seemed prior to Tanner Scott going off and signing with LA that they were going to focus some of that money that they're going to spend on Pete, on the bullpen, and potentially there may be someone out there to spend the money on. But it felt like Tanner Scott was the big fish that was left out for free agency as far as bullpen pieces go. there's still some other arms that they could explore. But as far as spending that money, if they're willing to spend the money out there for Pete and they're looking for, maybe that to up the price, obviously a lot more for Bregman, that money's burning a hole in Cohen's pocket. He's going to want to spend it in some way. So it feels like they are going to move away, because there is going to be some level of hurt from the fan base when Alonso doesn't suit up on opening day with the Mets. Like, there is going to be that feeling, despite all the PR thing and the fact that Pete Alonso turned down the original deal that was offered, that probably would have been the best deal he would have got on the open market. And then comparatively to the deal he's turning out now, which has the opt-outs, there will be some fans that are upset that number 20 is not suiting up at Citi Field. It's just the facts, because he has a lot of good moments, especially the one that's as recent as we saw in the postseason, all of that. So I think maybe by signing another player, especially a hard-nosed player, and have him play third base like Alex Bregman, he easily, by the end of April, could be one of the favorite players on that team, just how he plays ball. So, and I love Vientos, by the way. Looking at comparing, I would almost compare and put down money about Vientos and Alonso end of the year. I almost would put money down that Vientos might have the more favorable year. And I would back that. What Vientos has shown at the end of last year and going into this year, I'd be very excited to have a full season at first base from him. I really would be. So it's not like you're getting, who's going to play first for us. Vientos is a great option for that spot, and he could be your first baseman for a long time as long as he can get that position down.
Yeah, I'll say this. I actually don't mind Vientos at third. I know a lot of the peripheral stats paint a bad picture. Same thing as Pete at first. You can't just put anybody at first and expect them to be great. Sometimes I think that position has that. I don't know. People are inferring that a little bit sometimes. It's not true. And one of the parts of first base that can be so difficult is picking the ball. And there was nobody better in the league in Major League Baseball last year at picking the ball than Pete Alonso. And I watch him day in and day out. That is one thing he does terrifically. He doesn't always look great on his feet out there, but he picks the ball amazingly. That's huge. You bail your other infielders out sometimes. Like, you need that skill. That you don't necessarily know if Vientos can be amazing at that right away. I think he can pick it up over time. And the other thing I want to say about offensively that you kind of just said, the interesting thing about Vientos, if you dig in on him a little bit and look at the StatCast stuff and analytics, stuff like that, he has some similarities to some of the Pete stuff. So Vientos destroyed fastballs last year and really struggled with the breaking stuff, some off-speed stuff as well. And when I watch Pete, what always drove me crazy about him for the last couple of years is there are times in the season where he cannot lay off an outside breaking ball that starts in the zone and goes out. He just cannot recognize it out of the hand, and he swings and doesn't even look close. Like, he's ahead of it. He's like bending over, trying to reach it. Vientos doesn't have the same look, but he has the same struggles. And when you have a year under your belt, these reports that these pitchers are going to get are going to be very clear. Like, here's his weakness. This is what he struggled with last year. So, like, throw him more of this. So Vientos, man, I love the kid. And he seems like a super hard worker, has a close relationship with Lindor, which I love. And I believe in him. But as a second full year player, you're going to have to make some adjustments. Guys are going to pitch you differently. And there's going to be a book out on you. And you're going to have to make an adjustment as well. So, yeah, I don't know about the Metsies, man. Like, they're in an interesting spot because it's not only the Dodgers, like that division. Like, there are some things that predict records that have them finishing in third place in the NL East. And, like, you can't necessarily argue that that's not a possibility.
And the thing with Bregman, too, we look at the deal he turned down from the Astros, 6 years, $156 million. You're going to have to top that. And we got reports that he's looking for a long-term contract. He's not going to take one of these, prove it deals that we're seeing some of these guys that are holding out. He's holding steady that he wants this deal, recognizing it might be his final chance to get that big payday that he's been looking forward to. So if the Mets want to throw the money at him and maybe figure it out, they're going to have to overpay Bregman. Anybody is. So maybe it's the Blue Jays. The Blue Jays have been left at the altar multiple times. Maybe they just pivot and say, let's throw money at Bregman and we'll let the chips lie where they are and figure out what happens with Vlad, what happens with Bichette, and figure out what's happening out there. But at least you get somebody. And maybe that's the team that Bregman's looking for, someone who's desperate to overpay. And the Mets might fall in that category if they don't want to be in the bad grace of their fans after such a good offseason with stealing Juan Soto from the Yankees. Losing Pete Alonso might have a certain sect of the fan base upset at them. And we understand David Stearns has what's best for this team in mind, and he'll stand by the decision of not paying Pete, You mentioned before Vientos and Alonso being comparable for significantly less price at first base, more team friendly if we're still thinking about those things. And I know Steve Cohen has the flexibility to spend whatever he wants, but there still is a world that you have to be smart with the way you're spending money, because there is consequences for spending the money. And for a deal that Pete Alonso was looking for, the Prince Fielder deal that you and I were going deep in, there are consequences to that deal. And we could look at a Met team that gets hamstrung before they even get started by having a deal that sinks them down like an anchor. You want to have an infield, an outfield that is flexible in a way where you want to invest in your young players. And Mark Vientos is one of those guys I would feel comfortable investing in down the line. But for right now, take advantage while he's a cheaper player.
Yeah, and just to finish my thought, the actual stat here on breaking pitches, breaking balls, he hit 169 against breaking balls. His expecting batting average was 178, so pretty much in line. Slugging percentage against breaking balls was 358. Expected slug was 314, so even lower. Interestingly, he had a steady diet of breaking balls. So, like, he saw 46.9% fastballs, 40.8% breaking balls, only 12% off speed. Off speed, he actually did decent, so I was incorrect about that. 286 batting average against off speed. And he absolutely destroyed fastballs to a tune of 329 and slugged 620 against fastballs. Like, that is a great thing to see, but you're probably going to see less fastballs in the zone. And even if you see the same amount, could you possibly repeat that? So, I mean, I love the guy, but there are some things that I'm interested to see how he does in the second full season.
But at least you can salvage the money situation where you're not locking in for 9 years of
of course. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
but I'd rather not. But Vientos and Alonso were both parts of the team last year, so you're still taking
agreed.
Alonso away. Like, Vientos is not filling his spot. He was already there. So there's still something lost and something pretty significant.
But I think the Pete Alonso that is 2024, every year, if we follow the advanced statistics, he's going to be worse and worse and worse. And yes, 2025, 2026, you might be able to swallow whatever deal you're overpaying for. But in the long run, looking at this deal, the one he wanted, you have to let him walk. I mean, they offered him more than a fair deal. That first offer that Epler gave him was more than fair. And that still probably would have been paying over market value, as we're seeing as he sits out there, because he's not getting that offer right now, clearly, right? The Mets aren't the only team that need a bat. So, like, where's the other suitors out there? Why are the Blue Jays not throwing the money at him? There's got to be a reason. People are investing in these advanced statistics for a reason. And people are seeing, like, you're stepping on a landmine if you give this guy a long-term deal. It's just what it is right now. But speaking of some of the other conversations in here, we're going to finish up with the Cubs owner, Tom Ricketts, talking about payroll complaints like you and I were talking. There was a quote that he had on 670 The Score radio station at the annual Cubs convention, which also saw the return of Sammy Sosa waving that American flag around. Fantastic stuff. The quote was, "I think our fans somehow think we have all these dollars that the Dodgers have or the Mets have or the Yankees have, and we just keep it. It's not true. We just try to break even every year." So you put some stats here to let you lead the way. But if you look at the 2024 revenue for Major League Baseball teams, they sit at third, $506 million brought in. The only two teams above them are the Dodgers and the Yankees. So a team that's trying to break even, well, you're doing way more than that, sir. So this comes off a little bit tone deaf, especially in an offseason that a lot of money is being tossed around. And listen, I mean, they acquired Kyle Tucker. We'll see if they're able to secure him long-term. He was
almost brought him to arbitration too. Like, yeah, not exactly. A great start. They ended up not, but, like, geez, guys, like, like, you got to try to convince this kid to stay after this year. That's how you're going to start. Luckily, they ended up settling with him before they went there. But yeah, man. So they had a lot of teams right now are doing their, like, fans fest or fans conventions kind of things right now. So there was that comment. The fans were being very vocal. They booed when Jed Hoyer basically dodged a question about maybe going after Alex Bregman. There were also moans when they said most of the rest of the offseason will be focused on adding to the bullpen, which obviously is necessary, but not a sexy thing, not what they're looking for. They're looking for more here. There's not much for me to say here. This is the other end of the spectrum of when, people are trying to say, oh, don't blame the Dodgers. It's the teams that don't spend the money. I will say yes and no. Again, it's not the same story, But this is the other side of that, where it's like the Cubs are one of the teams that should be able to somewhat keep up with the Dodgers, at least somewhat close. At least the Yankees and Mets are trying. The Cubs, like, no one wants to hear that, even if that's what your thought is. So they're trying to apparently stay around 220 million. I think you said they're at 180, so 40 million left to spend. They're trying to keep themselves from eclipsing that next luxury tax threshold. But you're the Chicago Cubs, man. Act like it. You brought in Kyle Tucker. You can't start acting like, especially again, like, this negotiation is coming at the end of the year. And this is what you're putting out there. Like, yeah, we don't want to go crazy here. Like, Tucker's hearing that. Maybe this is not the place I want to be. And maybe on the other end, to defend them a little bit, they're doing that because they want to have some extra money in the chamber to be able to, try to keep him around. But again, it doesn't necessarily need to be verbalized so publicly.
Yeah, and the $220 million payroll projected, $241 million this year is going to be the competitive balance tax threshold that was used as a serious metric prior to the Dodgers just blowing past it and willing to just pay on top of it every single year. Because if you look at the penalties, they are pretty serious. And as far as financials go, 20% tax on all overages that first year, second year, 30%, third consecutive year, 50% or more. So from my understanding, the Dodgers on their third straight year are going to be way over, and their overages are significant, almost 100 million. So they're going to play 50% of that on top of it. And they're just throwing it out there, understanding that it's there. But this is proof that the competitive balance tax does work right now by trying to keep these teams in a line with a soft salary cap. But why is a team like the Cubs not willing to spend the money while the Dodgers are? And it might have everything to do with the deferred money at this moment. If you could defer some of the money, and if Kyle Tucker's deal, they could sign him for a long-term deal, and he's willing to take $2 million a year or $3 million a year, and the rest gets deferred to 2040. You're telling me Tom Ricketts wouldn't do that? So that's the game we're playing here, where the Dodgers are playing chess, everybody else is playing checkers, and we're trying to play within rules that the Dodgers not abiding by. So I understand why fans are upset, especially as you are, as I mentioned, the third highest sort of revenue coming in for a team in all of Major League Baseball, one of the most diehard fan bases that expects winning. We're about 10 years removed. Next year, we're approaching the 10-year anniversary of that World Series team. Don't you feel like we're getting old, Devin? This is the 9th season since the anniversary team. But regardless, I think this is a good conversation to have about looking at the future of the Chicago Cubs. And, they won't admit this, but the addition of Wrigleyville and all the stuff that went in there, if you've been down to Chicago for a game in recent years post-pandemic, there's a lot that has been built up. And they spent a lot of money to build up Wrigleyville in the time in between. And I think that pandemic year where there were no fans occupying those bars or eating the food or drinking the beer, it really hurt them. And I think they still are building themselves up because they invested a lot of money around Wrigley Field and they got none of it back that year. But I mean, at this point, we're 5 years removed from that. We've had fans spending their hard-earned money, buying those jerseys. It's time for them to invest and prove to Kyle Tucker, among everybody, that they're willing to spend with the big boys and spend that money you're making as far as revenue goes. Like I said, you're the third highest revenue in all of baseball. Start to act like it.
Yeah, well, apparently they were the other finalists for Tanner Scott. It was between them and the Dodgers at the end. I know the Red Sox apparently offered more money than the Dodgers did, or something along those lines, and he chose to go to LA anyway. But apparently they didn't want to go to the fourth year, and the Dodgers were okay with it. So they're still involved, and that does fit the narrative that they said they're looking for bullpen. I said this last week or the week before, and I tweeted about it as well. I love the fit of Jack Flaherty, man. By all means, it does not seem like they're going to do that or that they're interested. But we just talked to Mike Petraglia, who covers the Reds, a few days back, and asked him, as a Reds guy, like, who's the bigger threat? If you're trying to get first place there, who do you have to go through? And he says the Brewers, not the Cubs yet. But if you give me the Cubs with a pretty good lineup, Kyle Tucker there, Shota Imanaga, Justin Steele, and Jack Flaherty as well, like, let's go to work. Cade Horton maybe comes up in the middle of the year, right? Matt Shaw can help you out now. Like, you got some young studs there, one of the best systems. That's fun, man. Go get Jack Flaherty. You missed out on Tanner Scott. Go get Jack Flaherty.
Yeah, and we'll continue to talk about the Cubs. I think they're still a couple moves away. There's some bullpen arms out there that teams like the Mets, the Cubs, they're going to have small budget moves happening here, budget, quote unquote, compared to the big money that was spent elsewhere. But there's still some big free agents out there like Jack Flaherty. He would be a good fit in that rotation. I think the Cubs need something like that. And it wouldn't be the most exciting move, but as far as moves left to be had, I think it would be a move that bolsters the team on the field for 2025 and makes them a better team, because there is a good core there that's ready to win now. They're ready to compete in a very achievable NL Central. We discussed the Brewers being the reigning champion, but they've got worse. We looked at them get way worse as far as what their team looks like. So this division, if you want to say the aforementioned favorites are the Brewers just by default, the Cubs have every ability to jump up and grab that ring, but only if they add to that rotation. We mentioned the Reds too. I think people would be shocked if the Reds win the NL Central, right? I mean, we're all looking at it as we can all talk pie in the sky. We had, our guest on last week talking about the Reds, and if everything goes correctly, people would be probably surprised, but not shocked, I guess, in a way. But same conversation can be had with the Cubs. That division is wide open. Would it shock anybody if the Cardinals won that division too? It's out there right now for anyone to achieve it. Why not give yourself a little bit of an edge going out of here and just please the fans? Like comments like this, you don't have to say the quiet part out loud. Don't act like you're not making money on this team. Like you're just, it's a mom and pop shop. You guys have, again, the third highest revenue in 2024, all told, but things considered. After cost is done, you pay your payroll, you're still making more money than a lot of teams, majority of the teams. So don't act like you're not the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Mets, but on the contrary, you
Dodgers.
Are. That's exactly who you are.
Just not the Dodgers. We can't just counteract everything we said for the first 45 minutes, but the other teams I agree with. Like, no one's the Dodgers.
The Dodgers are not playing on the same game board as everybody else. That's my big point of contention with the Dodgers, that they're playing by a different set of rules. As far as playing by your own rules, the Cubs have the ability to spend the money if they want. We can't affect the deferment stuff right now. That stuff has to be addressed in the offseason and during the CBA. So,
yeah, Ricketts saying this reminded me of when Jerry Dipoto from the Mariners said that their main objective is to win like 54% of their games. Like, no, why is that coming out of your mouth? You can stay in your brain, man. It's like sometimes these guys have the liar, whatever happened to Jim Carrey in that movie, where they just start spouting off too much truth.
Right. All right, well, let's get to our finishing segment here, the Twitter polls and conversations as we finish up our show. All right, again, you can follow us on the X Machine at TableSetters Pod. Devin's posting Twitter polls and conversation out there, reading all the Dodgers tweets and getting upset by the National Writers. Devin, you posted a poll about which team matches up best with the aforementioned Dodgers in a 7-game series. I'll let you take the lead on with the results you got from this.
Yeah, I think it's important to clarify that I'm talking about in the playoff series, because then things change a little bit. And some people commented like, oh, should have an other option. I can only put 4 options, unfortunately. I think that's something X should change. I'd be very interested if I could put 8 teams to see how the percentages would break out. But the choices I put, and I handpicked them for different reasons. The Phillies, the Yankees, who were their World Series opponent last year, the Braves, and the Padres. We got a pretty good amount of interaction here. And I also told people, like, put in the comments any write-ins that I didn't put in here. And we did get some write-ins there. Yankees and Padres led the way, tied at 29%, the Braves at 24%, and the Phillies at 18%, which was very surprising to me. We also had several write-ins for the Diamondbacks. We had a few late write-ins for the Mets, and I think maybe one write-in for the Red Sox. And all of those you could make points for, not necessarily saying they'll definitely beat them, but we're saying who would be the biggest threat in a 7-game series. For me, when I'm thinking of who is threatening to a 7-game series, I'm thinking, number 1, rotation, especially top 3 to 4 guys. Number 2, do you have enough offense? Because there are games in the playoffs where the Dodgers just beat you over the head with their bats. We saw that last year where, the Mets, a few games, won a couple games from them, you can beat them. But in a series, it's just like, it's hard to keep up in a whole 7-game series. So that's how I think of it. And to me, the Phillies, man, I think this is a little bit of recency bias with them getting the lowest vote total. I understand their offense disappeared last year, specifically against the Mets. The Mets did a really good job against them. But when you look at that lineup and the playoff pedigree and experience they have, I think it matches up best. And then the rotation on top of it, 1 to 5. To me, those other teams, especially the Braves and Padres, they don't have that. Padres are missing Musgrove, right? And they're still talking about moving people. The Yankees are very good rotation. I still think the Phillies is a little better. The Braves, I feel like I love Sale, Strider when he comes back, Schwellenbach, if he can take the next step. That's a nice top three. Wondering if Sale and Strider can both stay healthy. To me, if I had to, like, put my life on the line and pick one of these teams, it's the Phillies. I like the Diamondbacks as a write-in because maybe it is a pesky team that takes down a powerhouse like they did a couple years ago. But yeah, to me, it was the Phillies. I do think the Yankees defensively, that wouldn't be their problem this year like it was against them this year. And the pitching is better. My thing is, and we're going to wait and see on this, we've debated this before, I would think the Yankees offense isn't quite as good as it was last year. So that is my hole I'd poke in there. When you look at those teams or the write-ins or someone that wasn't written in, who would you take? 7-game series, you had to take somebody against the Dodgers.
So I voted for the Padres with this poll being posted on there. And I think the Padres offer the biggest nail in the tire situation for the Dodgers. I think that they offer a lot of what the Dodgers, don't do well. I mean, there's not a lot the Dodgers don't do well, but the familiarity and just the peskiness, the Padres, they match up really well against the Dodgers rotation wise, offensively. Even going back to last year, I think if the Padres made it and found a way, I think the Padres could have found a way to potentially beat the Dodgers in a 7-game series. I think we can all imagine that. And looking at the Yankees, the fact that they got 29% of the vote is surprising to me because I think watching what the Yankees did against the Dodgers in the World Series, losing in those games. I mean, the Dodgers are pretty, I understand the run differential and all that considered when you look at the big scope of it, that it felt closer than it was. But if you watch those games, the Dodgers outclassed them in every aspect of the game. And looking at the Yankees, I know they got better in the rotation. Like you mentioned, offensively remains to be seen. Did they replace Juan Soto in the algorithm? Are they a better team offensively? Remains to be seen. Again, looking at the team as constructed, I think the Padres offer the biggest, whether it's just familiarity, as I mentioned, being a division rival, and just like there is sort of a bugaboo the Padres offer the Dodgers. It's like even in recent history, they have the ability just to throw out the spikes and have them get a whole bunch of flat tires, and they start to just fear the Dodgers a little bit. So there's an intangible vibes thing there, but all four of these teams, I think it'd be a good series, but I still think the Dodgers outclass all of them. And I think maybe just a division rival might, I don't know, maybe make them sputter in what they do well. And I could see the Dodgers beating both the Phillies, the Braves in a 7-game series, 9 times out of 10. And that's just where we sit right now.
Yeah, I mean, lineup wise, I love the Braves the most out of those 4 teams if they're healthy. Obviously, a ton of injuries last year. It was crazy, and they still made the playoffs. My thing with them is, like, we don't know how Strider's going to be when he comes back. Is he his normal self right away? Sometimes it takes a little while. We saw that with Walker Buehler. And then Chris Sale, man, as good as he was last year, and he was great, it was the most innings he's pitched in so many years. So it was kind of a shock that he was able to do that. And with that being said, he was supposed to start one of those games against the Mets the last day of the season in that doubleheader and didn't because of an injury, and then didn't pitch in the playoffs because of injury. So he pitched more innings than he has in many years, but he didn't make it to the playoffs. So I'm very curious. If Chris Sale's out there, he's going to be Chris Sale, but is he going to be able to put that health forward again? Or are we going to see some of that injury bugaboo that we've seen a lot in Chris Sale's, last 5-6 years of his career?
And the thing with the Padres too, going back to that series they had the Dodgers on the ropes. And I think maybe the fact that it was a 5-game series that I don't know, like there was something about the Dodgers sneaking that out. I remember where I was watching that game, and it felt like the Padres had them there being up 2-1 and just having the advantage. And the way they beat them in game 3, where, game 2, I should say 10-2, just bashing them to death, just resonates in my mind of they had the Dodgers dead to rights, and the Dodgers had some resilience and got past there. But in a different time and space, I think the Padres have proven that they can beat this Dodgers team, regular season or otherwise. I think they have to be given the opportunity and get themselves back to the dance. It's not a foregone conclusion, especially what the Padres did or didn't do this offseason, and potentially will continue to not do by trading Dylan Cease. They may not get the opportunity, but just the familiarity between the two franchises, similar to football, a division rival, it becomes a little bit more of a any given Sunday thing with those two franchises. And that might be what it takes to take down the Dodgers. Because right now, looking at these other teams that are allegedly the powerhouses in the league, the Dodgers to me outclass them in offensively and also rotation wise. And even with the Tanner Scott addition, a lot of them have a better bullpen too. So it's I don't know, it's alarming right now. It's just how much further ahead the Dodgers are as we sit here in mid-January.
It is. Alarming is a good word.
So, again, we appreciate you guys contributing to those Twitter polls when Devin puts them up there. And I think it does initiate good conversation. If there is a question you want to post us for the show, that's a good spot to put underneath it. Like, please ask this question on the show and have the conversation discussed, especially in the off season where it's a little bit more loose. We do put, a skeleton of what we're going to be talking about on here, but we kind of knew we were going to discuss mostly Dodgers and reference some of these other stories. Like we had stories on here about arbitration and those conversations, but those are small peanuts. And if we got to those, that means we weren't giving a lot of love to the main stories that needed to be discussed. You guys came here with the intention of hearing about Roki, hearing about our take on the Dodgers, and hopefully you felt like we gave it to you because we did dedicate almost an hour to it.
Yeah, man, it's just been, I think, going through our heads all day, and tried to be active on Twitter about it, but I think it feels better to verbalize it. So hopefully, whether you agreed or not, it was entertaining enough for you to listen to and give us your thoughts if you haven't already.
All right, well, let's come around third here, finish up our show, and preview the one that's coming up in a few days. So we thank you guys for joining us here, listening. Hopefully you guys are enjoying your day off, and happy Martin Luther King Day to everybody. And if you're in the Northeast, staying safe in the snow because there is a lot of it happening right now. Not a lot of snow to keep off, but the fact it's a nice little winter mix. We were talking about that last week. It felt weird that the South was getting snow, and here in the Northeast, we haven't felt any of it right now. But we'll be back next week with another guest as promised. We're going to be talking about the aforementioned San Diego Padres with the Divine Sports Gospel. We're having Matt Devine of the Divine Sports Gospel. They are a Padres-centric information machine. They're not just a podcast, but they post great social media content on there. Looking forward to hopping on with him and discussing the San Diego Padres from a source that is very familiar with them. We all follow them. We understand the stars and the inner workings, but it's nice to have someone who covers it on the daily. They can give us the take on the Dodgers and give us a take on Roki Sasaki, give us a take on Dylan Cease and what's going on there. And first and foremost, what's going on with Fernando Tatis Jr. and the perception of what the season should hold. Because things have changed. We talked about this, with the unfortunate passing of Seidler and everything that went down there. There is a different trajectory of this franchise. And we've talked about it and be interested to get his take on it because it is certainly something that is popping up in the mainstream of baseball.
Yeah, and we'll have him on. We'll talk with him Wednesday night and release it Thursday morning. And I'm interested now after a few days passing because we saw a lot of their content leading up to the Roki decision was super entertaining. As they said, they were kind of crashing out a few times. So to see now after a few days pass and you have a little clarity what their feelings are there, and also lose Tanner Scott to the Dodgers as well. So I'm looking forward to that one for sure.
So again, we appreciate you guys listening. Please support us on social media. Please leave a 5-star review if you get the chance to on your day off on snowy Monday. Follow us on IG at TableSetters Pod, also on the X screen at TableSetters Pod as well. 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, wherever you can find us. And as we exit this, we open the show with Bob Uecker and the unfortunate loss of Mr. Baseball. And we're going to go out with the final words of his Hall of Fame speech back in 2003 and everything that goes with the lasting impact he left on baseball. And we will talk to you after a while.
All the things that I've done, this has always been number one, baseball. The commercials, the films, the television series. I could never wait for everything to get over to get back to baseball. I still, and this is not sour grapes by any means, still think I should have gone in as a player. Thank you. Thank you very much. There it is, boys. The proof is in the pudding. And to all of you baseball fans around America and any place else, for your letters, your thoughts, your kindness for all of these years, It's been a great run, but number one has always been baseball for me. No matter what else I ever did, baseball was the only way I wanted to go. I thank you very much for your attention today. Thank you for having me, and congratulations to everybody here. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.